Welcome, everybody, to Survive in Advance on the Grueling True Sports Network. Survive in Advance is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. Make sure you go to MyBookie.ag, put in a promo code TGT50 for up to $1,000 free cash bonus on your first deposit. You can also go to thegruelingtruth.net, click on the MyBookie.ag banner at the top of the page. That will take you there and give you the discount also. I am your host for Survive in Advance, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome on our special guest from the FF Face-Off to talk a little bit NFL free agency again, since we had a really busy night again last night. Anthony Cervino, how you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm just trying to figure out why my team doesn't do anything, but then I remembered that they never have. And, of course, that would be the Cincinnati Bengals. So I'm just going to give up on that. Maybe I'll become a Browns fan after last night as the Browns pulled off a monumental trade with the New York Football Giants for Odell Beckham. It was first reported by the NFL Network's Mike Garofalo and confirmed by CBS Sports NFL insider Jason La Canfora. In return for one of the best receivers in football, the Giants acquired the Browns' first-round pick, second-round pick, and 2017 first-round pick, Jabril Peppers. Is this a win-win for both teams, or does one team stand out here for you?
You know, I did an instant reaction on this on the FF Face-Off last night, and I still, even the next morning, I still feel the same way. And what I feel is both sides won. Both sides are doing the right things for their team for the future. The Giants, they need the extra first-round pick. They need the safety to replace Landon Collins because Antoine Bethea, who they're signing, he's a one-year stopgap. Jabril Peppers can be there for a little bit. Then they got another pick. And what the Giants need to do, the way I explained it was Odell Beckham's, 27 years old?
Yeah, I think
26, so. 27 years old. Saquon Barkley is going into his second year. And Eli is a fringe retired player who's past his prime. So by time these pieces will never gel. They don't have a chance to succeed while everybody is peaking. By moving on from Odell Beckham and getting the pick, it allows the Giants to get a wide receiver if they want to, one of the top wide receivers, DK Metcalf and Keel Harry or Brown. And even if this is Eli's lame duck year and they go draft a quarterback, which I expect them to do and sit him, like, David Gettleman praised the Kansas City model. So that's what I think they're going to do. And by getting these early picks, now you are going to have your quarterback, wide receiver, and running back all within the same age group so they can grow together and peak together. For the Browns, they are very much built to win now. We saw a turnaround from the Browns last year behind Baker Mayfield. He threw 27 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. To me, besides Jarvis Landry, he didn't have a lot of help with wide receivers. They have a really good running back. And then they added Kareem Hunt, whatever you get out of him. David Njoku's a quality young tight end who has a lot of athletic upside. Now you add Odell Beckham to the mix, and the Browns have a legitimate chance to win the AFC North. When was the last time we've said this about a Browns team? Because the Steelers seem like they are in a little bit of a transition. The Ravens, with all the players they're losing, seems to be in a transition. And I like the Bengals a lot. You know, I've said it a few times on the show in the past couple of weeks. I think the Bengals can have a good season, but the Browns are the favorite. So this deal helped both ends, just like the deal last week when they swapped Olivier Vernon and Kevin Zeitler. Needs on both ends are being addressed. The only issue that I might have is, could the Giants have gotten a little bit more? Well, but that's the only downside. I think it works for all parties.
I think that's a big downside. The other downside is this. The Giants have not drafted well the last 5 or 6 years, which is why they're in this situation. They haven't been able to fix the offensive line. I would say, from looking on it at the outside at the start, I think the Browns won the trade because they acquired arguably the league's best receiver. He's only 26. He's under contract for 5 more years. And even if the Browns end up reworking Beckham's contract to give him more money, which they probably will at some point in the next year or two, they just added arguably the best receiver in the league who's still in his prime, and they didn't have to give up multiple first-round picks. I mean, hell, they didn't even have to give up the first of the 2 third-round picks. So I look at this, and this is something where you can't really grade it until you're 3 years down the road and see what the Giants got draft-wise. But I would just say, with this trade at least, the Giants got significantly worse by parting ways with one of the league's best receivers. And I think that's undeniable. Now, this could work out where the first-round pick this year and the third-round pick this year and Peppers all play great. But even then, I think the best they're going to do is break even. I don't see why they didn't get more out of this unless there's just not a market for Beckham as big as what we think.
You know, that's a good point that you bring up about the market. And last year at the deadline, we saw a couple of wide receivers on the move, and that was Demaryius Thomas, and he's past 30 at the end of his career, so it's understandable why the Broncos didn't get a lot for him. And the same thing with Golden Tate and the Lions and the Philadelphia deal. The significant one is Amari Cooper because he is still a young player. Dallas gave up a first-round pick. That's it. You take Antonio Brown, who was able to be acquired. You know, Antonio Brown's top 5 wide receiver. If not, you can make the case that he's the best, like Beckham. A third and a fifth. So naturally, Odell Beckham is going to be. I think that hurt his trade value.
Well, if you look at the Amari Cooper trade, Amari Cooper, I don't think anybody thinks he's a top 5 or even top 10 receiver. He's a damn good receiver, but he's not on Odell Beckham's level. And when you look at that, I mean, the Browns didn't have to give up. I mean, the Browns didn't give up much more than what the Cowboys did to get, Amari Cooper.
Well, can you believe this? Now, this is significant. Odell Beckham, you said, is 26. He's going to be 27. Amari Cooper is only 24 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the age plays a big role in the value that the Cowboys got with Amari Cooper. Hell, there's some rookies that are coming out that are 24 years old or close to it.
Yeah. So in the end, the Cowboys got a steal, and I think the Browns got a gigantic steal. Because I don't think Cooper has the ability to be a guy like Beckham, but he's damn good. So the Cowboys got the best of that deal, I think. But once again, it's according to what the Raiders draft with the Cooper picks. With Beckham, they're going to have to draft somebody pretty damn good to be able to make up for trading him.
You know, I think wide receiver is going to be tough in the draft because I think DK Metcalf, with his hype, we don't know. He could be viewed by some teams as the best wide receiver in this draft class when you could make the case that he wasn't even the best wide receiver on his team.
Yeah, because
what if the Giants
he looked great
him?
in shorts. If the Giants were to then pick him, they would totally be screwed, I think. Because you're not going to replace Odell Beckham with DK Metcalf. You may have a better chance to replace him with Sterling Shepard, who you've already got.
Yeah, but they need to hit on these picks. That's the only way you can justify this is if you hit on these picks.
Yeah, and you talked about Metcalf. I mean, I think the guy you're talking about that may be better than him is A.J. Brown, who, when you watch the film, yes. A.J. Brown is better than him. When I watch the film on Paris Campbell, he's better than him. When I watch Marquise Brown is better. But DK Metcalf looked awesome, half naked at the combine, running around with no pads or a helmet on. And this is why somebody's going to get burnt on this. And I think I think you also with Metcalf, he had a neck injury and was hurt after just 7 games. And he is very good at exploiting man coverage when you watch him, but and he's a huge mismatch size-wise, which is why he is good in the red zone and why he's good against man coverage. But if you watch him against zones, his route running's not that good. He doesn't have that sixth sense to be able to sit down in the zone, and I think that would be a major problem. And really, I think he is at best the fourth best wide receiver in this draft.
Do you think A.J. Brown is better than DK? I do.
Yeah, I do. I think he's the fourth best receiver in this draft. I think he's the second best receiver at Ole Miss. I think that if you don't look at the combine and you don't see him running around in his shorts and his T-shirts.
I mean, his three-cone drill was terrible.
Yeah.
I know he had an amazing, 40 and those other drills, but that three-cone drill, to me, that's being overlooked because you need your
much
receiver.
More important
otherwise,
than a 40.
He's only going to run 9 routes.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about this yesterday on Survive and Advance a little bit. If you remember, we remember the Raiders draft speed, straight line speed.
Darius Hayward-Bay.
Yeah, that's who I was trying to think of. And the straight line speed is great, but the way defenses are played nowadays, and as bad as offensive lines are, you don't have time to do that all the time. And this game is more of a read and react to what the defense is doing, running option routes, and I don't think Metcalf is built for that. So I think he may be an explosive player who could make some plays deep down the field from time to time. But overall, as a dependable number one guy, I don't think he's going to be that, Anthony.
Yeah, I think some team is going to take a chance and give him every opportunity to. But I am a little bit more alarmed than a lot of people about his agility.
All right, next up, let's go to another New York team, but a team that looks like they're trying to win right now. The New York Jets acquired Pittsburgh Steelers running back LeVeon Bell, a 4-year, $52 million contract. The deal includes $35 million guaranteed with a maximum value of close to $61 million, including incentives, the source said. What's your take on this? I mean, I think for the Jets, it worries me what we've seen out of Bell the last year and how much of a team player he may be. But if he's all in here, this could be a huge signing for the Jets in a division that outside the Patriots is not that good.
Yeah, and it all depends on how committed LeVeon Bell is. And now that he's going to be under contract, I do think he's going to want to prove himself. At least you want to have hopes that he will and does want to get that. Now that he got paid, now go earn it. Le'Veon Bell is going to drastically change the Jets. He's going to be a 3-down back. He still has some years left. He's only 27 years old. He's almost like when they brought in Matt Forte, he was a 3-down back who can do it all. This is what you're getting in Le'Veon Bell, only it's going to be maximized. Sam Darnold is going to face, an easier time maneuvering the ball downfield to his receivers, because if a team is going to stack the box against Le'Veon Bell, that gives a young quarterback a lot more confidence, especially with a better offensive line. They brought in Kalichi Asimile. A big winner in this is Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and this Jets team seems like they are headed in the right direction, but they're the Jets, so you just wait for something bad to happen. And you get to C.J. Mosley, which C.J. Mosley I think they overpaid for, but they're overpaying for a guy who I think is one of the best linebackers in the NFL, so that's worth a shot also. And when you look at this team, this was a team that was competitive in most games last year. You add guys like this to the fold, and you've got a team, I think, that can compete for a wild card.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on the development of, Sam Darnold, and I believe in him. I believe in Adam Gase, and only because when he had a healthy Ryan Tannehill a couple years ago, that team was a playoff team, or was at least going to the playoffs before Tannehill got hurt. And ever since then, Adam Gase didn't really have either a healthy Tannehill, or he was playing with Matt Moore or Brock Osweiler, Jay Cutler. He didn't really have the quarterback. Now he has his guy he can mold. They have some young, good receivers with Robbie Anderson and Quincy Enunwa, and signing Jamison Crowder brings a lot of speed and versatility in the slot. I think this Jets team is going to be really good on offense. They just need a little bit more on defense. I'd like them to bring in a corner to help solidify the back end of their defense. They have great safeties, but their corners are a little I don't trust them. But I think this team's going to be a lot better.
Yeah, but the thing about this team is if they're filling holes like they are, then there's less holes to fill when you get to the draft, and it's easy to maybe pick a corner in the first or second round and maybe another one in the fourth or fifth round,
right,
and make sure that you cover that up. So I think they're headed in the right direction. Adam Gase, I'm not completely sold on as a coach, but Adam Gase, being the coach in a place like Miami or Cincinnati or Dallas, it's hard to judge you as a coach because your front office is an absolute mess. So it's hard to really say a guy can't coach. So I think the Jets have been a mess too, but it looks like a mess that maybe they are cleaning up. But my only question is, when you spend this much money in free agency, sure, we saw it work for the Rams and the Eagles, but once again, the majority of teams that try to do this, Anthony, and the Dolphins were a huge example of that a few years ago, usually it doesn't work this way.
No, but here's the thing. Here's a rebuttal to that and how the NFL is changing. We saw the Eagles advance to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl using that method once Howie Roseman, got back to Philadelphia after Chip Kelly. And we saw the Rams advance to the Super Bowl. So I think we are going to see more NFL teams try to put together these power teams like we see in the NBA.
All right. Now, next up, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers.
Before we have breaking news.
What you got?
NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. Baltimore Ravens are signing Earl Thomas to a 4-year, $55 million deal.
Oh, how do you feel about that? I know you had your heart set on Earl Thomas.
Yeah, I did, but because Dallas they have to pay a lot of their own guys, so I understand that they probably weren't going to land Earl Thomas. It sucks being a Cowboys fan, but I get it from the business end.
Whatever. It sucks being a Bengals fan. Cowboys fans have it easy. At least y'all won a Super Bowl 20-some years ago.
Hey, you know what? Ha-ha, Clinton Dix is still out there.
Yeah, but ha-ha, Clinton Dix I don't think is quite as good. But let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. Let's talk a little bit about what the Packers have done here, because I really like what the Packers have done. And I think the Packers have went from maybe the third best team in that division to being able to compete for a divisional title again, if not win one outright fairly easy now, if the defense is as good as it looks like it might be.
The NFC North, they could potentially have 4 really good teams, and I'm going to include the Lions because Matt Stafford isn't. He's not as bad as people make him seem to be. And I think
Matt Stafford's problem is everything around him has been bad.
Yeah. And the other teams in that division, if you look at Kirk Cousins and the Vikings, and you have the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago, the Bears aren't a lock to do what they did last year. I think a lot of people just think, that they won 13, 12 games last year. It's going to happen again. It's very hard to repeat and win divisions again in the NFL unless you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I know the Steelers have been in a nice little run, but that's coming to an end. And when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, and now you're putting the pieces around him to succeed for years and years and years, a knock on Mike McCarthy and that organization was you're wasting Aaron Rodgers' best years by not going out in free agency and putting a quality defense. Their front seven could be one of the best in the NFL with the additions they made in Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith from the Washington Redskins. They have Blake Martinez and Jake Ryan. Their secondary is going to be really talented. They brought in your guy, Adrian Amos. They have those young corners that they drafted early last year. This Packers defense, paired with Aaron Rodgers, that could be a force in the NFC.
Yeah, I know. And when you look at it, Minnesota's still got Kirk Cousins, so they're in trouble. They did get to keep their linebacker, Anthony Barr, who originally was going to go to the Jets. Now, do you think with the Anthony Barr thing not going to the Jets, it freed the Jets up to be able to get Bell?
Yes.
Okay. Because that's
100%.
Because I know Lucas Weiss, who listens to the show a lot, who was a friend of the show, as soon as they announced that he wasn't going there yesterday, or texted me, well, they're probably going to go after, Le'Veon Bell now. So actually, in the end, they ended up all right on that. Let's talk about the Lions a little bit, because the Lions did sign a player or two. And what's your take on what the Lions have done so far?
Underwhelming on the Danny Amendola side. I get the signing. He's going to be, if he can stay on the field, I think he'll be pretty good. But the issue with Amendola is always his injuries and how much time he misses. But Matt Stafford, it's significant for him, for Amendola to stay on the field, because we saw a huge regression out of Stafford once you took away that slot weapon in Golden Tate last year. So getting Amendola healthy and in the slot is also going to free up Marvin Jones and Kenny Galladay on the outside. As far as Trey Flowers, I love the move. They need a pass rusher. I don't think they are going to retain Ziggy Ansah, so you're basically replacing one really good one with a younger, really good one. And then they brought in Kurt Coleman in their secondary to help out Darius Slay, who's one of the better corners in the league. So they're making some quality moves. It's just, can Matt Patricia put it all together? They brought in Darrell Bevel to replace Jim Bob Cooter, who I felt like was getting stale in Detroit. So they're doing good things. I mean, that NFC North is going to be really, really good and fun to watch.
Yeah, and let's transition over to the Tennessee Titans, because they made a move that I think is really underrated. Their offensive line was not very good last year, and they signed Roger Saffold, 4 years, $44 million. I think this is a good signing. I mean, Saffold struggled early in his career, especially when he was playing tackle, and he had some injury issues, but the last 3 years he's only missed one game due to injuries. And with the Rams last year, he was one of the best guards in football. So I think the Titans here show that they're going to move in the right direction, because they have to shore up that offensive line. And I think Saffold, even though he's up there in age, I think he's 30, 31 years old, I think this is a good signing for the Titans.
Yeah, Saffold is one of the best guards available despite the age, and he's going to improve this Titans line. A couple of years ago, they were talking about the Titans line being as good or better than Dallas's line. And so bringing a Roger Saffold into this mix with Ben Jones and Tara Lewan, Jack Conklin, and Josh Klein at right guard, this is going to be a really good unit. They need to, or want to, run the football behind Derrick Henry, and they want Marcus Mariota to stay upright and healthy. I don't know how much of Marcus Mariota's issues are because of the line or because of Marcus Mariota not being able to stay healthy. Or maybe he's holding on to the ball too long.
Or maybe he's not staying healthy because he's getting hit a lot more than what he needs to be.
I think Marcus Mariota might be is the problem in Tennessee, more so than anything else.
I don't. I think the offensive line was. I think Mariota has played decent at times. There's a lot worse starting quarterbacks out there.
7 touchdowns in 10 games last year.
Yeah. But it's almost won a game. What do you want? But my point is this. You could judge a quarterback a lot better when he's got a healthy, good offensive line in front of him. And, yeah, I think with him and Jameis Winston, who came in the league at the same time, there's still I think for Mariota and Winston, this is a make-or-break year for both of them. Winston's got a coach in Arians. He's got players around him that can make plays. So let's see what happens there. The same thing of Mariota, but these are two guys that I think you will see possibly even out of the league, or at least backups for the next 5 years if they don't play well this year, Anthony.
I have always said about that draft class of Winston and Mariota, I always kind of felt that they were overhyped coming in.
Yeah, but the draft class we got coming in right now is overhyped. They overhype every quarterback draft class. And most of the guys that are picked in the first round fail. It's just usually works that way. I mean, if you look at the year Mahomes got picked, he was picked in the first round, but there was 3 or 4 guys at least picked before him that were supposed to be better.
So how much of a reason why they fail is because they're going into a bad situation? Pat Mahomes went to a golden situation with Andy Reid and Alex Smith transitioning out, and they had all this talent and pieces. I think that plays a role. If Pat Mahomes was drafted number 1 overall
and was just thrown in, he would have failed probably.
Yeah.
Because coming out of college, he had a lot of mechanical flaws. I know he worked with a private coach, Jeff Christensen, who is also the private coach for Jimmy Garoppolo. And Christensen's a really good quarterbacks coach. And I would actually tend to believe it was more because he was with Jeff than even the situation he went into. Because a lot of these guys, the Cincinnati Bengals hooked their quarterbacks up with a guy who was a pitching instructor for the Cleveland Indians. That's who their private quarterback coach is that they recommend. So I think a lot of it is because really you're fixing your footwork and everything before you get to training camp. You're not fixing that stuff before you go. And I just think that Patrick Mahomes put the work in. And still, to me, I would say that the jury's still out on Patrick Mahomes because it's only one good year. It was one great year. But I also remember a point where Mark Rippon was the NFL MVP, Super Bowl MVP, and 3 years later he's not even in the league anymore. So I don't think that'll happen with Mahomes, but I think it's a little early to coronate him as one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL. If he does it again next year, then I think he can. But I think the jury's still out on anybody that's only had one great year because we've seen it in every sport, Anthony. A dude will come on, blow everything up for a year or two, and then kind of just go back to mediocrity.
Lynn's sanity on the East Coast in New Jersey, New York, that was crazy. And what happened to him?
Yeah.
He's in the league, but he's not. There's no more Lynn sanity.
There's a little bit here and there. There's pockets of it in the Asian community, but that's about it. Let's check out the Houston Texans. I think the Bradley Roby signing was actually a good signing, but they lose Tyrone Matthew. What's your overall take on the Texans so far?
The Texans, they're going to look a little bit different in the secondary. They lost Matthew, they lost Kareem Jackson, and Kevin Johnson. 3 really good. They still have Jonathan Joseph. But, you're losing your starting corner, and I think Kevin Johnson was their slot corner. Maybe I have that mixed up. But they lost 3 key playmakers in their secondary. I know they brought in – I'm drawing a blank on the safety they brought in. But they have some issues on the back end of their defense. They have a couple of defensive linemen that are free agents. I know they locked up Clowney, which was huge, but they need to replace some defensive pieces, and they also need to bring in a running back.
All right. Another one that's interesting to me is the Saints, who it looks like from sources at ESPN is going to ink DeMarco Murray. What's your take on that? Because is Murray a big upgrade from Ingram? I think he is.
Latavius Murray.
Yeah, what did I say, DeMarco?
Yeah, I was saying he's coming out of retirement.
No, I'm old.
They are signing it. I want to see the deal Mark Ingram is getting. Because I think a big reason why they didn't retain Ingram is because they're paying Latavius Murray a little bit less in the end, and the Saints do need some cap room. They didn't have the most going into free agency. Latavius Murray is going to play the Ingram role. He's going to be the short yardage, third down back, goal line back, and Kamara is going to probably dominate the touches. I don't know if he's an upgrade. I think it's a lateral move. Yeah. A lateral move, but younger.
Well, I think Murray catches the ball in the backfield a little bit better.
Than Ingram?
I don't know.
But we do have breaking news, more breaking news on Mark Ingram, and this is coming from Adam Schefter on ESPN. The Baltimore Ravens are busy. They just paid big money for Earl Thomas, and now they are signing Mark Ingram to a 3-year, $15 million deal.
Well, that's a great deal for Mark Ingram because with a quarterback that can't throw the ball at all, the Ravens are going to be a run-first team. So Ingram's going to get a lot more carries, and he's probably not going to have to share the load too much with anybody in Baltimore.
And this came up perfectly because I said I think the Saints made the Murray move because they didn't want to pay Ingram. Ingram's getting 3 years, $15 million. Latavius Murray signed 4 years, $14.4 million. So they're definitely saving a little bit of money and bringing in basically the same player.
All right, let's talk about the AFC North a little bit because history will tell us the Bengals and Steelers are probably not going to do anything in the way of free agency. If they do, they'll sign some backup players that way. I'm glad I waited till now because I would have been trashing the Ravens too, but it looks like the Ravens are trying to do something. But I think that the Browns have to be hands down the favorite to win this division right now. But that's before we see the draft and what they do. But there's talent all over the place on this Cleveland team.
Yeah, their offensive line last year by Pro Football Focus was graded a top 3 at the end of the season. And I know they're going to have a little bit of turnover by trading Kevin Zeitler, and they'll probably sign somebody, who can fill the role or draft a guard. I don't think that's going to be a big issue. Their skill position players are all magnified by bringing in Odell Beckham, and you have now Jarvis Landry. They retained Rashard Higgins. You have the 2 running backs, Hunt and Chubb. Baker Mayfield looks like he could be the real deal. And then David Njoku at tight end. This offense is going to be a pretty good unit.
Have they moved Duke yet?
No, they haven't.
Because I imagine somebody will give him something for Duke. So that would help also.
With the running back market drying up the way it is, I know Tevin Coleman is still available, but Bell's gone, Ingram's gone. Philly wanted a running back and a receiver. I know they brought in Deshaun Jackson, I guess, but they still need a running back. I think Philly could be a landing spot for Duke Johnson.
Is it possible they hold on to Duke Johnson because they're not going to have Kareem Hunt until late in the season?
I mean, reports are saying that they are shopping him already, so I think they want to move on from him sooner rather than later.
Yeah, but my question is, are they desperate to get rid of him, or are they just shopping him to see what they can get?
I don't think they're desperate, no.
Yeah, because I think with Kareem Hunt, we don't even know if Kareem Hunt's going to play this year, which is going to be according to how much pressure Roger Goodell feels from, groups. But when I look at that, I would think it might be worth holding on to him if you can.
We're not talking even with the Browns. I didn't even bring up Sheldon Richardson.
Yeah, I mean, Sheldon Richardson's a stud. And this is the thing with the Vikings. Losing Richardson, Anthony Barr stays. I think Anthony Barr staying is a bad move. I don't think Anthony Barr is very good in space. And I think we saw him multiple occasions last year where when you isolate Anthony Barr with a slot wide receiver or a tight end, he doesn't really move well side to side covering those guys.
No, but he knows the system. He knows the defense. It is definitely a player I think the Vikings wanted to keep. They almost placed a franchise tag on him, but thought that they would be able to retain him once he did test the open market.
Well, I don't know. I think he's been overrated. It's, you got to remember, this is a guy at UCLA, played fullback at UCLA before converting to defense his last year or two, and he's a great athlete. But his hips are bad in space. I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's 5 years, $67.5 million with $33 million guaranteed good. I think that's pushing it.
That's the going rate for edge rushers.
Yeah, but
outside linebackers.
I think that I don't think he's that great of a player to spend that much money on, especially when you look at the NFL draft that's coming up here and the fact that the defensive line is stacked whether you need edge rushers or interior defensive linemen. And you could have probably got that a lot cheaper than what you get Anthony Barr. I know you know what you get with Barr, but I would still worry about this team, especially you got to be able to beat teams like the Rams that have slot receivers, and they abused him. I think it was week 4 or week 5 last year and threw like 3 or 4 touchdown passes on him with Cooper Kupp. And I just think that he has...
Well, he has no business covering Cooper Kupp either.
Yeah, but this is the thing. He's got... For that much money, you would think that if he gets lined up with him, he could at least impede him for a minute so a safety could help. But last year, he got completely destroyed in that game.
One of the, you bring up the draft, and I think something of significance that the Vikings could potentially release Everson Griffin.
Yeah.
And that might be a player that they have to replace in the draft, too.
Yeah, but like I said, this draft, I mean, you're going to have defensive linemen that go into third round. They're going to be starters for a few years in the NFL. I mean, it's loaded. Big time loaded. As loaded as I've ever seen a defensive line draft. All right, what's your take on the Bills? I mean, you got Ty Neshke. I think that is a great upgrade for them for only 2 years at $14 million. And, I mean, you got to remember, the Bengals gave Bobby Hart 3 years at $21 million. And Neshke, or whatever the hell his last name is a hell of a lot better than him.
I think the Bills, between Neshke and Mitch Morse, they're making themselves better up front to protect Josh Allen. They brought in Cole Beasley and John Brown to pair with Robert Foster, who looks like he can be a pretty good receiver. He has a rapport with Josh Allen already. They also have Zay Jones, who, you're putting these pieces together, and hopefully some of these picks, like Zay Jones, who they drafted early a couple of years ago, could start, breaking out a little bit. They brought in Tyler Kroft at tight end. The Bills are making themselves.
Well, John Brown too, which gives Josh Allen a deep threat.
Yeah, the Bills are going to look a lot different and be competitive. You bring up the Jets. I don't think we should sleep on the Bills. I think they're going to be one of those teams who win ugly, really ugly.
Well,
but they're going to win games.
Yeah, but they won ugly and made it to the playoffs 2 years ago. And I think their coach has done a great job there because, like I said, when I watched them last year, there was very few times where I watched them and I thought these guys were not trying. I think that he has them playing hard all the time. And as if you up the talent level, if everybody's patient with him and not winning a ton of games right away, I think that he could really do some things there because it seems like these guys really play for him.
Yeah, they like Sean McDermott a lot. I know he came from, Philadelphia. He spent some time there. I believe when Andy Reid was there or Chip Kelly was there, Jim Johnson, he coached under him. I like Sean McDermott a lot, and the players like playing for him. And anytime you get a situation like that and the team can win those ugly games, and you could be talking about a potential wild card team by the Bills.
All right, now let's jump back over to the NFC and the Los Angeles Rams. What's your take on what they've done? They re-signed Dante Fowler. I think 1 year, $12 million for Fowler is nuts. But what's your take on him so far?
The Rams are going to look a little bit different on defense. They did re-sign Fowler, but I don't think they can re-sign Sue. They released Mark Barron. LaMarcus Joyner is now in Oakland, and I know they replaced him with Eric Weddle. But they wanted to win in 2018. That was the year they, built to win for, and now you're going to see some turnover, and I think the Rams are going to be one of those teams who can kind of fall off the cliff a little bit, almost like Philadelphia last year.
Yeah.
Todd Gurley, you have the issues with his knee. They tendered Malcolm Brown, his backup, who spent the season on injured reserve last year. You need depth there.
Yeah, and the one good thing, and I can't believe I let this get by without saying anything, was Mitch Moroz to the Buffalo Bills because last year
did I say his last name wrong? I called him Mitch Morse.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, but the point is he's a really good center, and he's much better than Russell Bodine. And Russell Bodine was a Cincinnati Bengal, and he was an absolute joke when he was a Bengal, and I couldn't believe that somebody else gave him a chance to play in the NFL. Let's look at the Arizona Cardinals. Are the Cardinals trying to win, or you think they're just trying to sell tickets?
I think the Cardinals, I question if they are trying to win. Because the Cardinals, they brought in Cliff Kingsbury, who I get the upside there, but a guy like Cliff Kingsbury brings a lot of media attention. And so does the fact that your GM and your new young coach is trying to shop last year's first-round pick, Josh Rosen, so you can draft Kyler Murray, who brings a lot of media attention. and they signed Terrell Suggs, a player like that. He's there to sell jerseys at 36, 37 years old. Really, I thought Suggs would sign with the Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, and
I just these moves and what they're doing, it's going to sell tickets, and that's why I feel like the Cardinals are trying to do.
Yeah, but will it really sell tickets to sign those guys? I mean, if you see, that's the other thing. If you're looking to sell tickets, the way to sell tickets is to get Josh Rosen out of there and pick up Kyler Murray with the first pick.
Right. But Cliff Kingsbury, just because he's new, and just because people want to connect him with Sean McVay, that gives the fans something to go to the game, at least for the first couple of weeks until the ball's kicked off.
Yeah, so I don't know. When I look at it, some of these teams blow my mind. I mean, you have a salary cap. Everybody's making billions of dollars on their team. Why aren't you trying to win? Now, a team that's interesting to me is the Kansas City Chiefs, who the defense is the reason they had issues last year. They signed Tyrone Matthew. You want to talk a little bit about what the Chiefs have done and how you think it affects their chances this year?
I think the Chiefs are having a pretty good offseason so far. They are probably going to move Eric Berry. They brought in Tyrann Mathieu, who's a little bit more dependable than Berry has been ever since he's been dealing with these Achilles injuries. The Chiefs brought in another linebacker, Damian Wilson from the Cowboys, outside linebacker. I think he's going to improve the middle of their defense. They traded Dee Ford.
Yeah, they're the 49ers.
So they're going to have to get another pass rushing presence, but I think this defense could be better. And I think a big reason why they maybe moved him is how much did Dee Ford fit in Spagnuolo's system.
Yeah, and Dee Ford's a good player, but what you saw with the Chiefs was if teams ran the edge on them, the Chiefs could stop them. It was teams that ran between the tackles against them that ate them alive, and the Patriots ran between the tackles, ate them alive, and beat them in the playoffs. If you were the Colts, they're running a zone read stuff, they're trying to stretch stuff out, but with that defensive line, they are really fast laterally, but kind of small up front, if you know what I mean. So when you try to run laterally against those guys, they're going to run you down. Let's see. Who haven't we touched on yet, Anthony? What about the 49ers? I mean, we've got Garoppolo, who will be back now. This is a team I think that is interesting. They have talent. I think there's still questions about the coaching staff. Not as many as it would be if Chip Kelly was still there. But what's your take on what they've done so far? I think Dee Ford is a great signing.
They brought in Dee Ford, and they also signed Quan Alexander, who is a really, really good player if he can stay healthy. This defense, I like it a lot when you consider Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, now Quan Alexander, and Solomon Thomas. There's a lot of first-round talent.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of 49er fans mad because they didn't go after C.J. Mosley. But as crazy as this sounds, I think Quan Alexander fits what they do on defense better than what C.J. Mosley does.
And we're not even talking about, they also have Frank Warner. They have a really good defense. Now, their secondary is where the issues are when you have an aging Richard Sherman and, whatever else they have in their secondary. Adrian Colbert, he missed a lot of the year, so they need to bring in help for their defensive backs.
Yeah, but they've already brought in help for their defensive backs by bringing Dee Ford to the table here, because that's going to give their defensive backs less time they got to cover. But also, once again, this is a team that I assume is doing it right, because what they'll do is they'll plug those holes, and then you just got a few holes left that you can plug with the draft. When you get teams like the Bengals, they got a bunch of holes to plug. They'll plug nothing during the draft. They'll plug half of the holes they need to fill in the draft, and then the other half they'll go into the season with, and that's why they'll suck. So when you look at them, I think the 49ers have done this the right way. I still have doubts about Kyle Shanahan. And
are they going to take Joey Bosa if he's there at 2?
Well, if you take Joey Bosa, you mean Nick Bosa? Is it Nick or Joey?
Oh,
it's Nick, isn't
Nick.
All right.
Nick.
Okay.
Joey's his brother.
Usually I'm the one that has name issues, But yeah, if you look at this, if the
Joey
Cardinals,
Bosa plays for the Chargers.
yeah, Joey Bosa is a Charger. So Nick's the guy that's coming out in the draft. Um, I, I I'm not that sure Nick's going to be that great. I don't know that he's going to be Joey. When you watch him, I think there are issues when he takes on bigger tackles, which is going to happen here that can move a little bit. I would think that's the way they would go because if you get Bosa and you've got Ford on the other side, you're strong up front. You've got a hell of a front seven. I mean, that's probably what I'd do. But the other thing that you could always do is this. You could always trade down and get, maybe multiple picks, and then you can fill in everything plus add depth with it. So I think what you did with D Ford is you made it maybe not as necessary to take a Bosa. And maybe you could trade down, draft offensive line, DBs, and fix everything within a year or two here.
Yeah, and if they can accomplish that, then the 49ers, especially with, we talked about the Rams losses. We didn't even bring up their losses on the offensive line, cutting John Sullivan, losing Roger Saffold. So their offensive line is going to be in transition. We could be talking about the 49ers as possibly a surprise NFC West winner.
Well, I think people could be surprised that it could come down to the 49ers and Seahawks.
Jared Goff's going to be exposed in 2019.
Jared Goff's already been exposed. It's just, the thing is this. When he has, what do you call it, Todd Gurley completely healthy and they're handing him the ball, he looks like a good quarterback. And he had a great offensive line in front of him. Now the offensive line's not going to be as great. We don't know how healthy Gurley's going to be, but it strikes me that Todd Gurley's going to be a guy that's always going to have injury issues. And if this all falls on Jared Goff's shoulders, all of a sudden Sean McVay, instead of being the boy wonder, will be the boy looking for a job in a couple of years.
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if they can't run the ball, and I'm not even talking about Gurley's knee, if they can't run the ball with their offensive line, if they don't replenish that, and then all of a sudden, the Rams offense could go from a top 5 unit to what we saw in the Super Bowl.
All right, real quick, let's touch on something near and dear to your heart. One of your favorite teams, the Philadelphia Eagles. Talk about what they did a little bit. They signed Deshaun Jackson, which helps. What do you think?
Well, you broke up there.
I said, what do you think of the Deshaun Jackson shining? I mean, when you look at him now, the on-field fit is perfect because you've got him, Alexander, Ertz, and now Jackson. They have the classic XYZ receiving core. What do you think here?
I think it's a quality signing because Deshaun Jackson, he doesn't have to be the number 1 wide receiver. He can be a nice complementary piece, a nice speed piece, deep threat. But I don't know if he's a drastic improvement.
I don't know that he's a drastic improvement either.
Not at this age.
I'll tell you, right now, and this is no shot at you, I know you're a Bills fan, a Cowboys fan. I would still favor the Eagles in this division just because of Doug Peterson. But I think in the end, it'll be the Giants or the Cowboys because I think Carson Wentz, and I'm going to keep saying this until somebody listens. I said it 3 years ago when I ranked the quarterbacks coming out in that draft. He has injury problems. And almost every season he's played from college up till now, he's missed games because of that. And now you no longer have Nick Foles to fall back on when this happens, Anthony.
No, and I mentioned this a couple of times when we knew the Eagles weren't going to retain both quarterbacks, that the Eagles, because of all the question marks with Wentz, they're one of those teams that have to protect themselves behind Wentz because there are not many Nick Foles out there. There are not many backup quarterbacks who can go and lead your team to a win, never mind to a Super Bowl victory. I even bring up Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota. There are 2 other quarterbacks to where you better have a pretty good backup who can go in and win games.
Yeah, the other thing I'll give you for the Eagles, though, is I think Malik Jackson was a great signing them 3 years, $30 million. He's the replacement for Tim Jernigan.
Yes.
And that's why I always give the Eagles a chance, though, because I think Doug Peterson in the front office knows what the hell they're doing. I think that they have to go with Carson Wentz because they paid him so much money.
Oh,
He's the number
yeah,
one
absolutely.
pick. And when you look at him, if you just look at him throw the football, Wentz is better. And really, Wentz is better. But the problem is this. Wentz gets hurt a lot. And Nick Foles won you a Super Bowl and damn near had you, if you're an Eagle, in the NFC Championship game again this year. So when you look at that, I would have went with Foles just because I think the injuries are always going to be an issue for Wentz. I think Wentz is a good quarterback, but the other big thing is this. I don't think Wentz is near the leader on the field that Nick Foles is.
No, and that's the difference between the two is the intangibles.
Yeah. And the intangibles are usually the difference between a guy that can win you the Super Bowl and a guy that can put up big numbers. Dan Marino was a better quarterback than Joe Montana, but Joe Montana had the intangibles, and those intangibles are why he won. And you could say, well, he was a 49er, but Dan Marino was a Dolphin. And when he got to the Dolphins in 1983, the Dolphins the year before were in the Super Bowl. And he had them in the Super Bowl a year or two later. And you could say, well, Joe Montana had a great coach. Well, supposedly, so did Dan Marino. So when you look at those guys, I don't think this. If Dan Marino goes to the 49ers, I don't think he wins as many Super Bowls as Joe Montana did with them.
No, I mean, we can never tell now, but you make a good case there.
Yeah, since we can never tell, I can basically talk out of my ass and say anything because it can't be proven. Let's see. All right, Anthony, you got anything else you want to touch on before we go? I think we covered pretty much everything today that we didn't cover yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we missed anything. Things that just came through, the Patriots resigned Jason McCourty, and the Cowboys resigned Jameis Olawale, their fullback. All
right, so what we'll do is you stay near the bat phone in the bat cave, and when some big signings happen, we'll have you on the next day. Also, Daniel Brown, the tight end for the Chicago Bears, he will be with us the day after he signs if you want to be on that call too, Anthony.
Sure.
All right, 'cause I thought it would be more interesting and relevant for us and Daniel if we had him on the day after he signed instead of the day before free agency starts. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and we are going to take a commercial break to check out mybookie.ag. Anthony, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru. You can also follow my show at the FF Face Off, and you can find us on all of the top social media platforms.
All right, guys, we're going to let Anthony go, and then we'll bring Bobby Sheridan from the Sheridan Report on for a little On This Day for a few minutes. So we will be back right after this.
Hi, I'm Mike Goodpaster from the Grueling Truth Sports Network, and I'm here with just one simple message. If you're watching the games, it's time to start making money. The Grueling Truth has recently partnered with MyBookie.ag, an industry-leading sportsbook website, who reminds you that where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on, and that's why The Grueling Truth urges you to check out MyBookie.ag. In addition to the usual thousands of odds, money lines, proposition bets, and futures offered on MyBookie.ag daily, they also have in-game live betting and a mobile site that makes wagering on the go easier than ever. So join now and MyBookie will give you up to a free $1,000 cash bonus on your first deposit. Just enter promo code TGT50, that's TGT50, to take advantage of this offer. You can also go to thegruelingtruth.net, click the banner at the top of the page for MyBookie.ag, and also get the same benefit and the same $1,000 free cash bonus on your first deposit. So visit MyBookie.ag, courtesy of The Grueling Truth, and enjoy winning today. MyBookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid.
All right, guys, make sure you check out MyBookie.ag for up to a $1,000 cash bonus, promo code TGT50, or just go to thegruelingtruth.net, click on the banner at the top of the page. All right, it's time for the man of the hour, Bobby Sheridan. How you doing, Bobby?
Hey, good morning, Mike. I'm doing great. I'm back home, no longer in Indian Wells. Enjoyed a couple of days, but I'm glad to be here talking to you this morning.
All righty, so we are doing On This Day, and I would remind people at 2 o'clock you can hear the Sheridan Report, where Bobby will dispense useful information that you can use on mybookie.ag and make a little bit of money. So what is the on this day today?
Well, on this day today, in 1961, I've heard of this boxer, of course, but I don't know a lot about his career. I was hoping you could expand a little bit, which I know you can. 1961, Floyd Patterson, I can see his face, KO's Ingemar Johansson in 6 for the head.
You there?
Oh, yeah. Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah, you kind of cut out when you said defeated.
Oh, I'm sorry. Floyd Patterson KO's Ingemar Johansson in 6 for the heavyweight boxing title.
All right, so what do you want to know? Actually, Johansson was a dude, that was their third fight, and they fought 3 times in a row. The first fight was one of the bigger upsets in boxing history, as Patterson upset Johansson, or Johansson upset Patterson. Patterson came back, Johansson beat Patterson. Johansson comes back, loses the next 2 to Patterson. Johansson was, I think, from Sweden. But Patterson was a guy that was trained by Cus D'Amato, who, of course, later went on to coach, I think it was Jose Torres, who was a light heavyweight champion. And then, of course, at the end of his life, he trained Mike Tyson and saved Mike Tyson from Mike Tyson. But when you look at Patterson, he was a guy that, he lost to Joey Maxim, who was a light heavyweight. The problem with Patterson was there was no cruiserweight division back then, and he was usually in the 190s when he was fighting. He was undersized, and he became the heavyweight champion of the world, if I remember right, because Rocky Marciano retires, and they have Moore and Patterson fight for the title. Patterson wins the title by beating Archie Moore, and Archie Moore was up there in age. He defended against guys like Tommy Jackson, Pete Rademacher. Rademacher was a guy that it was his professional debut, and he's fighting for the heavyweight championship. But he was an Olympian. He was popular, so he got a shot at the title. He then beats Roy Harris and Brian London. London was a terrible fighter. Harris was not very good. But he was basically protected for the 2 or 3 years he was the champion. Then he fights Ingemar Johansson 3 times, winning 2 out of 3. He defends his title against Tom McNeely, which you may have heard Peter McNeely, who was Tom's son, who eventually fought Mike Tyson and was a fringe heavyweight contender at the same time. And the big problem with Patterson was D'Amato did not want him fighting Sonny Liston because Sonny Liston was a bad dude. And finally, it got to the point where Liston was the number 1 contender so far or so long that they were threatening to strip Patterson of his title. So they went ahead and agreed to fight Sonny Liston. I think that was like August or September of 1962. And I know that was a closed circuit fight. Patterson received probably 55-60% of the money, and it looked like Patterson himself had been convinced he couldn't win by his trainers. He gets knocked out in the first round. They get him a rematch. The rematch, I think, is like 9 months later at Miami Beach Convention Center. He gets knocked out again, I think, in 1 round. And you go on from there. Or it was a convention center in Las Vegas. But back-to-back 1-round knockouts. He comes back, and, he was a good fighter. He just wasn't physically big enough to hang with a puncher like Sonny Liston. And he comes back, and I think he beat Eddie Macon. And then the big fight he had was George Chuvalo. I don't know if you've ever heard of George Chuvalo, Bobby, but
I've heard of him.
He was a Canadian, and he was one of the toughest guys you're ever going to find. He went the distance with Ali twice. But the 1965 Ring Magazine Fight of the Year was between George Chuvalo and Floyd Patterson. Patterson won a controversial decision, and that led to 9 months later he gets a shot to fight Muhammad Ali for the heavyweight world title. And Ali took him out in 12 rounds. But the thing that's interesting about that, and this will show you the dark side of Ali, was that before the fight, Patterson insisted on calling Ali Cassius Clay. Ali responded, as Ali normally would with guys that would do that, by calling him Uncle Tom and promising to humiliate him. And Patterson went into this fight with a bad back anyways. And you can see when you watch the fight, you can find it on YouTube, his corner working on his back between the rounds. Patterson took a knee in the 6th, and Ali just brutally beat the hell out of him. But the quote that really got to Ali was Ali told a guy from Ring Magazine, or Patterson told a man from Ring Magazine before the fight, the image of a black Muslim as the world heavyweight champion disgraces the sport and this nation. So,
Wow.
that's the thing. And it was a complete mismatch. And Ali carried him just to beat on him. And it's kind of the same thing Ali did against Ernie Terrell, who called him the same things a couple years later. But, yeah, he wrecked Patterson pretty good. But Patterson, once again, good fighter. Comes back, beats Henry Cooper. He fought a draw with Jerry Quarry, then lost a disputed decision with Quarry, lost a disputed decision with Jimmy Ellis. Who else did he fight? He fought Oscar Bonavina, who was a damn good fighter. He beat Bonavina, and that was towards the end of his career. He finished his career with a rematch against Muhammad Ali. Ali stops him in 7 at Madison Square Garden. So the thing is this, people don't rate him very highly as a heavyweight champion or as a heavyweight. But if you'd had a cruiserweight division at that time, or if you would have had a light heavyweight division that could have paid more money and he'd have fought at a lower weight, I mean, he was an all-time great talent. His problem was he just wasn't big enough to fight at the heavyweight division.
Right. Well, was it Patterson or was it Terrell that Ali had said?
He did it to both of them. Did it to both of them.
Oh, okay.
He carried Terrell the entire fight and just said, "What's my name?" repeatedly. With Patterson, he brutally beat and then finally knocked out. Muhammad Ali in the mid-'60s was not a man to piss off.
No, I guess not. And then, he has his, exit from the sport for a little while, then comes back and fights Frazier. And I can see now, totally, I could put myself in that time to where that was the fight of the century. I could totally see that.
Because they were two of the baddest dudes that ever walked the face of the earth. And the big question there with Ali Frazier is, what happens if you don't have the 3-year exile? Because without the 3-year exile, that fight probably takes place 2 years earlier, in like 1969. And 2 years earlier, I don't think Frazier was as good, and I think Ali was even better. So I don't think Ali ever stops Frazier, but I think the 3 years in between and the drama and the build-up there, in the end, probably helped it be a greater fight. But when you look at it, the question is, you could have had even bigger fight between Ali and Foreman then. Because let's superimpose this and say that Ali in 1969 fights Joe Frazier and beats him, and he was never stripped of his title or any of that. George Foreman in 1968 won Olympic gold. He knocks out like his first 30 opponents. You probably would have had the biggest fight Ali ever had would have been in 1972 or 73 face-off. He would have been undefeated maybe. George Foreman's undefeated. That might have been the fight of the century when all was said and done if it wasn't for the Vietnam draft and all that.
Right. Wow. Yeah,
and then the question is, could that Ali have beaten George Foreman? Because that Ali would have never been beaten and probably doesn't come up with the strategy to let Foreman punch himself out.
He might not have, and it's amazing how history can just be rewritten.
Just by one simple little thing changing. And when you look at it, Joe Frazier was a big favorite to beat George Foreman when they fought in 1973. And Ali would have been a big favorite in 72 or 73 if he was still undefeated. And I don't think he would have had the urgency or... Not that Ali had fear, but when you're fighting George Foreman that the guy in front of you is a very dangerous man. And maybe he doesn't realize that as much if that's not there.
Yeah. Wow. You want to hit this other one, Mike, or do you want to there's one more ahead for on this day. You want to hit it, or you want to get it on the...
you want to hit it, or you want to save it for the Sheridan Report?
Hey, we can do either.
We can save it for the Sheridan Report, but what you can do is you can tease us with it right now, and we'll come back with it in an hour.
Sounds good. It's 1983 on this day, and it's the basically the ACC men's basketball tournament final happened today. I guess they were running a little bit, ahead of where we are on today's current schedule, but NC State beats Virginia 81-78. This is the Valvano year, and what an incredible run that was. I want to hear your thoughts on that that run.
All right. So we'll talk a
during
little
our
1983 NC State, Jim Vivano and their Cinderella tournament runs in the ACC and the NCAA tournament. And that will all come up at 2 o'clock Eastern on the Sheridan Report, where Bobby will give us where we should put our money in our MyBookie.ag account later on the day. Bobby, anything else before we wrap it up?
Sounds good. We have four plays today on the report, and two of them are top plays. And I'm going to tease you a little bit. You got to come back on at 11 Pacific and 2 Eastern, because we have an early game again, just like we had Notre Dame yesterday, early, which was 11:30 start, 2:30 Eastern. We've got a 12 o'clock Pacific, 3 Eastern start from the Pac-12. So we've got to get you on board live for that listen.
All right, guys, so we'll be back at 2 o'clock on thegruelytruth.net. You can hear us live. You can go through Spreaker or thegruelytruth.net for probably about a 20, 30-minute show. We'll do a little sports betting talk, and we'll talk about the 1983 North Carolina State Wolfpack. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this show up for today. I want to thank Anthony for coming in again. Make sure you check him out on the FF Faceoff. Make sure you check Bobby Sheridan's The Sheridan Report out. You go to thesheridanreport.com on the internet, or at Sheridan Report on Twitter. Let's see, what else do we got? Tonight at 8 o'clock, we'll have Indiana Basketball Weekly with myself, Colin Hartman, Cole Hanna, and special guest Kent Sterling to preview the Indiana-Ohio State game tomorrow night and basically do a preview of the Big Ten basketball tournament. And then tomorrow, I will be back at noon with Survive in Advance. Bobby will be back right around 1 o'clock, so we can do it on this day. So make sure you check us out on all the platforms we're on, which include Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Kent, I almost said Ken Sterling, for Bobby Sheridan, Anthony Cervino, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak. Hey,